On the 10th anniversary of our relationship, he fell for someone else. He took her on the hot air balloon adventure I'd always wished for, snagged her the riverfront condo I dreamed of living in. The day I had surgery, she was stranded on the freeway during a storm. He told me to hang tight, just hang on a bit longer. He'd be back soon. I questioned him, "Are you scared of losing me? Or are you worried she's by herself?" He stayed silent. On our 10th anniversary together, Derek had another girl. The phone on the table kept lighting up. It was her. "Your tie doesn't match your outfit today. Next time, let me choose for you." The tie was a gift from me. The suit, also from me. On our wedding anniversary, Derek mirrored everything I had ever given him. Now he's one of the city's top dogs. Such a combo looked ridiculous. But he claimed people who say it looks bad are just jelly that I have such an amazing wife. Really? Is she jealous too? She texted again. "By the way, do I look good today? Do you like me?" Attached was a pic of her bare shoulders shining, young and pretty. From the bathroom, Derek called out, "Can you grab me a towel?" For a second, I froze. Then a cold tear slid down my cheek, and I realized what was happening. With shaky fingers, I scrolled up. I saw him call her baby, saying she was his true love. Over the years, Derek had become so composed and grown up. I thought he was over cheesy nicknames. Turns out he still loved them, just not for me. Derek walked out, mumbling, "Why didn't you answer me? I'm freezing here. Where else are you going to find someone like me?" His words halted when he saw my pale face. After a beat, he said, "Lily, it's not what you think. She's just an intern trying to cut corners." This day was bound to come. I stood there quietly and headed to the bedroom. Deep down, I'd seen this coming. I knew. I always knew. Years back, when he came home drunk, his assistant brought him back. He was mumbling, "Baby," and she casually helped him out of his shoes and loosened his tie. She addressed me as Miss Lily, her eyes sharp and hostile. I offered her a glass of water and politely asked her to leave. That night, I sat by the window, my mind in chaos, unable to sleep. I knew there wasn't anything between them, maybe just some flirting, but doubt grew like mold in the dark. When Derek woke up, he sensed my unease and buried his head in my neck. "Trust me, we've been together for so many years. I know what to do and what not to do." Did I trust him? I wanted to. But suspicion took over. I became obsessed, checking his schedule, his phone, grilling him over the tiniest things. One day he got fed up. "I've already fired her. What more do you want?" His eyes showed disappointment. I froze, staring at my reflection. Was that me? The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the strong version I thought I knew. Messy hair, a tense look. I covered my face and broke down. Derek pulled me into his arms, softly saying, "Please, just trust me." After that, he seemed to change. He hired a male assistant, shared his schedule with me, even let me peek at his phone. When I planted someone in his company to keep tabs on him, he ignored it. Have you ever tried giving half your life to someone else? I have. I've known Derek for 13 years. For nearly half my life, he's been a part of it. We spent 10 years together supporting each other. I agreed to give him another shot. But now, that shot was gone. We'd been married for 5 years. He once said he'd throw me a grand wedding once his career blew up, to show everyone I was his wife, his only one. I remember the sparkle in his eyes when he said it. We both looked forward to that day, but that day will never come, and I regret it. I stood outside the bedroom, begging me to open the door. "Lily, let's talk this out. Please, open the door. Lily, say something." Fearing I'd hurt myself, he called a locksmith. I opened the door casually, dragging a suitcase. Over the years, we'd had plenty of fights, but it was always him who left. This time, I chose to go. "Let's split before it gets uglier." He didn't respond. He just grabbed my suitcase, stubbornly trailing behind me like a kid. In this big house, there wasn't much worth taking. When he wouldn't let me have the suitcase, I started packing in plastic bags. Each time I grabbed something, he'd snatch it away. I was drained. "Why don't you bring her over? Let me see the woman who made you throw away our years together." Was I bitter? Maybe. Derek froze, pain flashing across his face. He probably couldn't get why I was so calm this time. Maybe it was because I'd had enough of the disappointment, or maybe I'd seen this day coming a long time ago. Don't do this. Don't torture me. Yell at me. Hit me. Just don't act like this. Was I the one torturing him? No, everyone has to own their choices. I smiled. Shouldn't she come to claim her prize? His eyes turned red. I love you. I don't know what happened. Maybe it's because she reminds me of you. She's stubborn, just like you used to be. I whispered, am I no longer myself? He fell silent. Late at night, I left with my plastic bags. Derek blocked my way, dropping his pitiful act. He rubbed his temples. What do you want from me? I admitted my mistake. How long are you going to drag this out? How could he act so justified? I stared at the man I'd loved for 10 years, speechless. You manage the company's finances. Everyone respects you as Boss Lily. What more do you want? What more do I want? He knew exactly what I wanted. Using a tone bordering on charity, he said, she's just a fling. She can't threaten your position. No matter what, you're my wife. I didn't respond, walking past him to the elevator. His voice turned cold. Lily, if you leave tonight, I'll bring her home right away. Even now, he resorted to threats. I smiled bitterly, my voice surprisingly calm. Do as you wish. He froze. As the elevator doors closed, I saw his face full of disappointment. He still thought I was being unreasonable. At the hotel, I got an Instagram DM. I'm Mia. It was her. After we followed each other, neither of us spoke. Her adding me was too coincidental. Did Derek tell her I had already found out about her? Look at that. Just as I left, he immediately went to find her. A relationship of over 10 years turned out to be this fragile. Mia's Instagram didn't have time limits for viewing posts. I casually scrolled through her profile. She clearly put effort into it. Every pic was flawless. And in every single one, Derek was there. He always told me he was traveling for work, too busy to breathe. But he somehow found time to take her to watch fireworks and go on hot air balloon rides. Without saying a word, she flaunted their happiness at me. In those photos, Derek smiled like he hadn't in years. He wasn't young anymore, yet he looked like a kid. Genuine, passionate, utterly in love with her. My chest felt tight and heavy. A dull, throbbing ache spread through me. I used to believe so firmly that no matter how the world turned upside down, he would always love me. Does he still love me now? I can't say for sure. If he does, how could he seek out someone else? If he doesn't, why go to such lengths to hide it from me? Maybe it's just nostalgia, or maybe he simply doesn't want the hassle of a breakup. Mia spoke first. She wanted to meet and talk. I agreed. At the cafe, Mia eagerly recounted the story of how they met and fell in love. It was cliché, the typical tale of a young woman and a wealthy older man. Nothing special. With a sincere expression, she said, I really love him. Please let us be together. Her tone was self-righteous, as if I was the villain blocking their happiness. How could I explain to her that compared to the years I spent struggling alongside Derek, their so-called love story was laughably insignificant? If she had known Derek when he was young, she probably wouldn't even like him. It was I who taught him, step by step, to become the man he is today. Now he's gentle, successful, and cultured, irresistible to young women like her. Stirring my coffee, I asked, if you met 20-year-old Derek, broke and eating expired bread, sleeping in a dingy basement, would you still love him? She froze for a moment, hesitated briefly, then said, I don't care. I love him now. I shook my head with a smile. When you're in my place someday, there'll be others just like you. She insisted. That won't happen. Derek will always love me. So naive. She looked at me, pretending to be sympathetic. Derek doesn't love you anymore. Let go. Holding on like this isn't good for any of us. I asked her, did he ask you to say this to me? Her eyes darted away. I smiled. It wouldn't look good for someone as proud as him to have rumors spread about replacing his wife after gaining wealth and fame. He values his reputation. We've known each other for over a decade. I know him better than you ever could. After a pause, she said, you drove here, right? Can you give me a ride? I live in the Villa district in the east. So that's where Derek had hidden her. She added smugly, he told me you always wanted to live there. She thought she had one, smiling triumphantly. It must have been 6 or 7 years ago. A client lived there. We dropped them off, and I caught a glimpse of the beautiful riverside view from their living room. At night, the city light sparkled, and a Ferris wheel across the river slowly turned. I was mesmerized. The client, slightly drunk, noticed and said, "Nice view, isn't it? Do you like it?" I awkwardly nodded. "This place is expensive. Who knows if you'll ever afford it in your lifetime?" Back then, I was just a young girl. His mocking tone brought tears to my eyes. On the way out, Derek held my hand and vowed that one day he would buy me a place there. Later, when he became successful, he asked if I still liked that riverfront house. I did, but it was too far from his office, and I couldn't stand making him wake up earlier and commute longer. So I shook my head and said, "What we have now is perfect. As I get older, I value practicality. Living here is more convenient." I didn't take the house, but someone else did. All the regrets of my youth, he offered up to another woman. All the regrets of my youth, he offered up to another woman. It's ridiculous. Am I bitter? Probably. I planted the grapevine, watered it, nurtured it, worried it wouldn't get enough sunlight to grow or too much and it would scorch. I cared for it day in and day out, year after year. When the grapes finally ripened, someone else plucked them. All that was left for me was a withered branch. How pathetic. Over the years, I've learned to control my emotions, but the bitterness and resentment gripped my throat like a giant hand, choking me. I suppressed my feelings and said calmly, "You should call a cab. It's not on my way." I practically fled. In the car, nausea overwhelmed me. I pulled over and puked violently. Dr. Kent later told me I was pregnant. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. Congrats, we tried so hard for this kid. The doctors warned me to avoid stress and overworking. I had stepped back from managing the company, taken up reading and flower arranging, lighter activities. Franz recommended supplements, but my sensitive stomach made them unbearable. Derek would stay up all night, rubbing my back and comforting me when I couldn't keep the pills down. We even tried surgery. It failed. I remember sitting by the window, pale and dazed. Derek's eyes were red. I knew he was hurting just as much as I was. Still, he softly comforted me. "Lily, we don't need a kid. I just need you." Life can be so ironic, can't it? I gave up on having a child, and now here it was. Dr. Kent, a longtime family friend, was genuinely happy for us. "You should tell your husband the good news. You two have finally made it through." I held the test results, unable to smile. After much thought, I decided to tell Derek about the baby. We arranged to meet at a restaurant. The place hadn't changed in years. The shops next to it had come and gone. The streets around it transformed. But it stayed the same. I remembered when we first arrived in the city, broke and hungry. We'd share the cheapest meal, splitting it between us. Derek was so good to me back then, pushing all the meat in his bowl into mine. We were so in love back then, sharing bites, neither of us full. The soup was unlimited, and that's why we chose the spot. On one trip for refills, the cashier muttered, "Haven't you had enough already?" Derek's hands trembled as he held the bowl. His face turned bright red, but he stood in front of me, shielding me from those judgmental stares. Just as he struggled to explain, the owner noticed our predicament. He told us, "From now on, pay for one meal and eat for two here." Derek never forgot that kindness. Years later, after his company took off, he invested in the owner's business to help him expand. The only condition was that this particular restaurant stayed the same. On the surface, he claimed it was nostalgia, but I knew he was reminding himself never to forget the struggles of our past. But while the restaurant remained unchanged, people do. When I arrived, Derek had already ordered the food. The familiar aroma brought back memories. But things weren't the same anymore. We no longer shared even a single piece of meat. "You've lost weight, Lily," he said as he placed food on my plate. "Eat more." His tone was so gentle, as if the fights and betrayals had never happened. This peaceful interaction was nothing but a facade. Mia's arrival shattered it completely. "Derek, didn't you say you didn't love her anymore? Why are you still meeting her behind my back?" Derek's face darkened. "Leave," he told her sternly, but Mia exploded. "Let me tell you the truth. I'm carrying your child. She's a hen who can't lay eggs, but I'm not." Derek's expression grew stormy, and suddenly, he slapped her. "Watch your mouth. Apologized to Lily. It had been years since Derek had cursed like that. Mia clutched her face, tears brimming in her eyes, glaring at us with a mix of defiance and misery. Then she turned and ran outside. A car sped by, horns blaring nonstop. A driver shouted, "Crazy woman! You want to die or what?" Derek's hand clenched tighter on the table as his gaze stayed fixed on her, even as she disappeared into the crowd. Finally, he looked at me. "Lily, she's young and impulsive. I'm afraid she might do something foolish." I nodded. "Go check on her." He left in a hurry. I sipped my tea, its bitterness stinging my throat. It reminded me of when I was younger. I'd been pregnant once. We'd been careful, but the child still came unexpectedly. The doctors told me to avoid stress and overworking. I couldn't leave Derek to face the challenges alone. But I also knew how soft-hearted he could be. If I told him, he'd hesitate and beg me to keep the baby. So I didn't tell him. I went to the hospital on my own. I thought we were young, that we'd have more chances. I thought my body would recover quickly. But Derek noticed something was off. Back then, he cared for me deeply. He could sense any change in me. I thought he'd yell at me for not discussing it with him. But he didn't. He just cried. It was the first time I'd ever seen him cry. He knelt before me, swearing that he'd give me a better life one day. He knelt before me, swearing that I'd never have to suffer like this again. His eyes shone with determination, filled only with me. He truly loved me back then. And now, he truly doesn't. I went to the hospital alone that day. It rained heavily. As I waited outside the operating room, Mia messaged me. "Wanna bet? Let's see if he chooses the one in my belly or the one in yours." She sent a photo of herself standing alone on a rainy highway, followed by a screenshot of her sending Derek the same message. Not long after, the nurse called my name. "Lily, where's your family? Is no one here with you?" I shook my head. "I'm alone." Then my phone rang. "Lily, don't do anything rash. Wait for me, please." Derek pleaded, his voice frantic. I could hear the honking of cars in the background. "Lily, think about everything we've done for this child. Think about all the effort we've made. Wait for me. Let's talk it through. Don't you want to be a mother?" I asked him, "Are you scared of losing me or worried about her being alone?" He didn't answer. Then Mia's voice chimed in, full of cheer. "We'll come see you together." Her words abruptly stopped as Derek cut off the call. Oh, so he'd already found her. Her methods were clumsy. Derek is smart, he couldn't have been fooled. But he was scared. Scared of hurting her. Scared of losing her even by the slightest chance. As the icy fluid entered my veins, I closed my eyes. He used to rush toward me with the same determination. Memories flooded my mind, too many to count. We'd been together for so long, that I thought he was always meant to be a part of my life. At 17, I met him. 17, a beautiful age. But my 17 was a mess until Derek came along. Derek, the boy from the city, an outsider in our small town. Rumors spread quickly there. They said he was an illegitimate child, that his mother had been someone's mistress to support him. Whenever he heard those words, he fought back fiercely, always ending up bruised and battered. The man who's now calm and composed was once a lonely, defiant teenager. Sometimes I marvel at how time changes us. I don't know why he noticed me, maybe because of the bruises on my arms or our similar situations. We became close friends. When my dad and stepmom planned to marry me off, it was Derek who saved me. He showed me there was a world beyond this small town. He stood in front of me, telling me I still had him. He held my hand and led me to escape, saving me from being treated as someone else's possession. He was one of the few bright spots in my dark past. But now, that light has dimmed. Memories have turned into sharp knives, stabbing at my heart. Time is cruel. It's turned us into unrecognizable versions of ourselves. When I woke up from the anesthesia, I sat by the bed, dazed. Tears slid down my face, cold as ice. Derek rushed in, his voice harsh. "What have you done? Lily, that was our child. The child we worked so hard to have." I looked up and noticed his shirt buttons were done up wrong. I didn't want to think about what that meant. "Lily, answer me." "Are you crazy?" I pulled out the divorce papers from my bag and handed them to him. He snatched them and tore them to shreds. The pieces fell like snow. It had been years since he'd lost control like this. Don't put on this act, Derek. You brought all of this on yourself, I said. The reason we ended up here is because of you. His brows furrowed deeply, fists clenched at his sides, trembling with force. The air grew heavy, suffocating. I doubled over, shaking with discomfort. Derek finally gave in, his tone softer. Lily, she wasn't on the highway. She lied to you. He explained that Mia had intercepted a call from Dr. Kent while he was showering. She fabricated the photo and conversation. In that moment, everything became clear. No wonder his buttons were mismatched. What they'd been doing before he came here was obvious. I rushed over as soon as I found out, he said. Lily, I genuinely want this child. I want us to raise it together, give it the best life possible. I'll be a good father and a good husband. I asked, and what about the one she's carrying? I'll make her get rid of it. No one will threaten our child's place. His tone was firm and resolute. He'd say anything to make me stay. I couldn't help but laugh. Laughing and laughing, I ended up in tears. The pain in my lower abdomen was sharp, like a knife twisting inside me. I felt like I really didn't know him anymore. The Derek I remembered was sincere and kind. He was never like this. Never like this. My laughter didn't stop. Derek couldn't keep his cool. In the end, he grabbed my shoulder hard. Stop laughing. Do you have to go this crazy? I wiped away the tears at the corner of my eyes. If you won't sign, then we'll see each other in court. Later, I started prepping for the divorce proceedings. Winning the case wasn't hard. I had plenty of evidence. Everything Mia had said and Derek's affair was all documented. But still, it wasn't as simple as it seemed. Derek had a lot of connections. At the first hearing, he didn't show up. He only called me and asked, Lily, does it have to be like this? I said, let's just think of it as a grand farewell to our past. He sighed, his voice tired. Lily, let's meet one last time. Derek took me back to the small town. Everything had changed so much. The school had been renovated. It was the season when the grass was green and the birds were singing and kids were playing soccer on the field. A ball flew toward us. Without hesitation, Derek instinctively blocked the ball with his body. It was just like it was many years ago, when classmates spat at me, when my dad hit me with a broom. He was always there, standing in front of me. He asked, "Did it hit you?" I shook my head, feeling a sense of sadness. We could endure hardship together, but we couldn't share happiness. We walked out together. Several times, he tried to hold my hand. I didn't let him. We followed the same path we took when we ran away. On the hillside, he twisted his ankle. I tried to pull him up but couldn't. I could only watch as he rolled down the slope. Derek? He appeared, holding a bouquet of flowers, jumping out of the grass. I was still in shock, and the Terran May I nearly spilled over. He knelt down on one knee. Lily, I owe you a wedding. Let's start over. In the box was a huge diamond ring. I promised I would give you a grand wedding. I never forgot. No, you promised a grand wedding. I never forgot. No, he had forgotten. We had been married for 5 years. In these years, his company had grown bigger and stronger. But only now, he remembered. Derek pushed the hair from his forehead. Lily, do you remember this scar? We said we'd never be apart. Forever. I shook my head. There's no forever? Is it really so hard for you to love one person forever? He seemed desperate to prove something, his tone urgent. It's not hard. It's really not. I've always loved you. He was still lying to me. He was lying to himself. He nearly knelt before me. I was wrong. I really was wrong. I still loved you. Lily, please give me one more chance. Let's start over. I looked at his face and I wondered, when was the last time he cried? It was when he got his first big deal, holding me and saying, I told you I'll make you happy. The joy overwhelmed him and his eyes turned red. Even further back, it was when I agreed to marry him. He cried so much, saying he would love me for a lifetime. A lifetime? But we'd only been married for a few years, and now he didn't want to anymore. And then there was that time. Back when the company was just starting, I did everything. Secretary, finance, purchasing, cleaning. I worked myself to exhaustion. When I woke up, the doctor told me it was probably stomach cancer. The words hit me like a huge stone to the chest. All the vomiting and stomach pains had a reason. I felt like it wasn't real. I stood frozen, murmuring, "It's impossible. How could it be? You're still so young." He seemed to have lost his mind, dragging me out of the room. "We're not staying here. It must be a misdiagnosis. We'll go to another hospital, find the best doctor." But I understood better than he did. I knew what was coming. My mom died from stomach cancer. In the early stages, it's treatable. But at that time, we didn't have the money, so we had to let it go. As time passed, she was no longer recognizable. She said, "Don't let your dad see me. I don't look good." She had no idea. The one she worried about had long since hooked up with someone else. I was only 5 at the time, already seeing how fleeting affection could be. I was really scared. I was afraid that, in the end, I'd end up like that with Derek. "Get out. Just leave me alone. Go away." When we got to the big hospital, I hit him, kicked him, and told him to leave. He didn't say a word, just hugged me tightly. His tears soaked into my collar. So hot. I couldn't soften my heart. I couldn't let myself soften. The scar on his forehead was from that day when I hit him with the key. Even when it bled, he wouldn't leave. I had no choice. He said, "No matter what the result is, we'll face it together, okay?" I have money, Lily. I have money. What was the first thought that crossed my mind? I didn't want to drag him down. He was young and talented, his future bright. This was an opportunity he had waited for a long time. That money was so important to him. I wouldn't touch a penny of it. After that, I stopped talking to him. I just wanted him to leave. In truth, I was so scared. I couldn't sleep. I knew he wasn't sleeping either. He was curled up in the corner, there were too many people in the hospital, and the nurses felt sorry for him. So they brought him a blanket and let him sleep on the floor. A guy over 6 feet tall, curled up, he was just a small ball. How pitiful. Had he eaten? What was he thinking? We didn't speak. As dawn approached, I felt him come closer. The air was silent for a long time. He was looking at me. I knew. He secretly held my hand. His fingers traced my eyebrows and eyes. So light, so gentle. Like he was afraid to disturb my sleep. I didn't open my eyes. Once I opened them, my heart would soften. The hardest time was that afternoon, waiting for the results. I read, watched movies, walked, but I couldn't focus on anything. Every movement made me dizzy, made me nauseous. I threw up. Derek was frantic, knocking on the bathroom door, asking what was wrong. Later, he held me, repeating over and over, "Don't be afraid, Lily. I'm here. Don't be afraid." He said, "Without you, what's the point of all my success?" I still told him to leave. "Don't push me away. I'm more scared than you. If I leave now, years later, I'll still think what a jerk I was." He forced a smile, but couldn't. "Without you, maybe I wouldn't live to see those years." His eyes were so red. At that moment, I hated everything. I hated how unfair fate was. Why did it treat me and my lover like this? We had already suffered so much. We had slept on the streets, under overpasses, in broken-down houses. His embrace became the warmest place. At our lowest, he would wait outside a bakery for stale bread, only to be yelled at. "You're useless, can't even make enough for bread." At another low, when I had appendicitis, he worked at a bar to make quick money, but drunk customers slapped him with money and humiliated him. He was young, full of anger, but he kept his fist clenched and didn't say a word. He needed that money to make me better. Finally, we didn't have to sleep on the street anymore, didn't have to eat expired bread. He was rarely insulted now, and never hit. Our life was about to turn around. It was really just one small step away. Fate always has a way of playing tricks on us. It gave us a glimpse of hope, only to take it away when dawn arrived, revealing it to be all for nothing. Later, the test results came back. The doctor said everything was fine, it was a misdiagnosis. Derek cried uncontrollably, holding me, laughing and crying, crying and laughing. A man over 6 feet tall, yet that day, he cried like a child. I suddenly realized just how much I love this world. I really do love him. He too, truly and deeply loved me. Who changed him? I don't know. I want to know too. I pulled my hand away from his. I looked up at the sky. The sunset was beautiful. "Derek, do you remember what you told me?" Beautiful. "Derek, Do you remember what you told me? Rather than crying hard, it's better to run hard. Let's look forward, okay? He knelt there stunned. Like a deflated ball, all the hopes from moments ago had vanished. His eyes were red. You're so heartless. On the way back, neither of us said a word. The car radio played a song, whispering in my ear, saying their love for me will never change. I sat in the back seat, drifting off to sleep. When the car stopped, Derek was standing by the roadside, smoking silently. His shoulders were shaking badly. Finally, he broke down in tears. Later, I heard that after drinking, Derek had pushed Mia in a fit of anger. She lost the baby. A doctor I knew secretly told me that it would be hard for her to get pregnant again in the future. The only thing I could think of was karma. The divorce proceedings with Derek also came to a close. Thanks to my efforts, most of the assets went to me, including the villa in the eastern part of the city. When I went with my lawyer to reclaim the property, Mia was lying in the bed resting. The nanny opened the door. Mia saw me and smiled, covering her mouth. The large diamond ring on her finger sparkled brightly. You have to come to our wedding. The lawyer stepped forward, pulling out the property deed. Miss Mia, you need to vacate this property by today, or we will have to report it as trespassing. Miss Mia, my client doesn't want to make this a bigger issue. Please leave. Mia's face twisted into a sneer. It's just a shabby house. I'm tired of it. It's a second-hand house, and someone's in a hurry to take it. How funny. I sat on the sofa, casually saying, Derek is just a piece of second-hand junk, and even you're in a rush to take him. Her expression froze. Quickly, she lifted her smile and walked toward the hallway. As if to claim her territory, she linked her arm with Derek. She's trying to kick me out. Derek looked at me, his gaze complex. He parted his lips, like he had a lot to say. But in the end, all he said was, Lily, long time no see. I nodded, a simple acknowledgement. His gaze shifted to the ring on Mia's finger, and his tone grew sharp. Who told you to wear that ring? Mia froze, her eyes quickly filling with tears. The illusion of happiness she had built collapsed in an instant. Derek almost violently tore the ring off her finger. Lily, this ring is dirty. I'll buy you an even bigger one. I shook my head. I don't need it. Just get out of here. The buyer for the house is waiting. He paused, his expression stiff. You're planning to sell it? Yes, the house is too dirty. I don't like it. Mia, with a trembling voice, cursed me. You're so heartless. You'll get your comeuppance. I slapped her hard across the face. Shut up. If it weren't for you, how would things have ended up like this? We wouldn't have lost our child. Mia covered her face. I killed her child? But didn't you kill mine? She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I really didn't want to watch this drama. I turned to my lawyer and said, I'll leave this to you. And I walked out. Derek tried to chase after me, but Mia grabbed him. She doesn't want you anymore, and you're still chasing after her. Do you have no shame? Later, a big company offered me a job. Without hesitation, I left Derek's company. Honestly, I was content. In our business, he had contributed more than I had. It was fine this way. I would have more opportunities, and we'd see less of each other. One day, the receptionist said, Boss, a Miss Mia is here to see you. I thought for a moment and decided to go downstairs. In the cafe, Mia screamed hysterically. Why? I gave him everything. Why did he fall for someone else? He promised me he loved me. He said he would marry me. I had already said it. Their past wasn't worth mentioning. Anyone could replace it. She stopped crying and suddenly looked up, grabbing my hand with a crazed expression. Take him back. He still loves you. That time I told him you were pregnant, he grabbed my throat and asked why I hadn't told him sooner. I thought men always think with their lower halves, but that day he actually held back, put on his clothes, and went to find me. Should I feel moved? No, I felt disgusted. I wiped my hands with an alcohol wipe. That's enough. Don't come looking for me again. If you do, I'll have security throw you out. Actually, this city isn't that big. I still run into Derek from time to time. At a party once, we crossed paths. He was with a young, beautiful girl who seemed vaguely familiar. Lewis said, That girl looks like you, but she smiles even more like you. Lewis is the chairman's son and my temporary subordinate. He's been working with me lately. He's quite humorous. When Derek saw me, he pulled his hand away from his companion and rushed over. She's just my companion. Some occasions require a woman. That's none of my business. He didn't need to explain to me. If one day you want to come back, I'll welcome you anytime. I smiled and said nothing. That night, I had a dream. I dreamt of 17-year-old Derek, saying, "Hello, I'm Derek." Then I woke up, the tears dried. Outside the window, the sky was just beginning to lighten. I will keep moving forward, flourishing all the way, every step a success. 10 miles of spring breeze, but no more of him.